4?
Yeah.
The next group presenting?
Yeah.
Will you speak to your other group member?
Yeah.
They're on their way or?
I know she's sick.
Oh, okay. She's sick, yeah. Stomach
Yeah.
virus, okay. So Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, Friday. Will, how's it going? Hmm?
Finally feel better.
Okay, that's good, man. Yeah, I guess we'll talk about human sexuality when I see you later. Yeah, submit. All right, moving along. How was everyone's break? Good. We are past the halfway mark through the semester. So things will probably speed up a lot quicker than they did the first half. I see that some people got their journals in. If you haven't, please submit at least journal 1 as soon as possible. We have 2 more exams before we're pretty much done. So look forward to that. We're gonna have exam number 3 next week, Monday. In which case we'll stay home and take that online. And so we're gonna wrap up this next chapter, motivation and emotions. Motivation and emotions. Interesting chapter because we'll be talking about drive. All right, so we want to kind of paint a picture on what drive is. How do we become motivated and how is it tied in to our emotions? There's an old saying in psychology, the neurons that fire together wire together. Right? So sort of the same fundamental actions of neurons firing for motivations are tied in with several different emotions on what creates that motivation or drive. So what is motivation? Right? How are you motivated? You're here motivated to get here to class today. All right? You say, what motivates you essentially? What do you like? Probably a goal, right? Some sort of goal. 2 things we always consider in psychology. One is the conscious mind, the unconscious mind. So we say the unconscious mind has an automatic drive which you are unaware of, which you don't know. In essence, your unconscious mind is not knowing. It's unknown. It's only knowing when you bring it forth to the conscious mind. Then you know, it becomes personal. So if we think of motivation, we're thinking of directed energy towards a goal. Directing your energy or excitation towards a given goal. That is motivation. We'll look at different types of motivation. Obviously, they are sort of sequestered in a way that they are hierarchical, right? So you have a motivation to eat, because it's the primary source of existence, to drink water. You have an unconscious motivation for sex, right? You are hardwired to reproduce, to essentially create a clone of yourself in some regard, unconsciously, right? And although you may argue that consciously and say, I have no interest in children, your biological automatic processes doesn't really care, right? Which means you're in conflict with it constantly. It requires there to be a motivation not to have children, right? You're motivated not to have it. You have a directed goal not to produce potentially, or not to get married, or do anything of the sort. Or maybe the opposite. You have a motivation to go that's directly conscious to reproduce. Right? So we'll look at it in 2 ways. Always be thinking that we are in constant conflict with the unconscious mind. Right? Much of it is automated, natural processes. And then we have our conscious mind, which is, usually has a heavy influence by the ego, right? Self-driven personal things. On the opposite side, we want to think of forces of the environment on us, in which case the environment is pulling us towards something. And that can be unconscious as well too. we could think of the pushing method, where we have our conscious mind, right? Our ego driven to facilitate something that will make us feel pleasure. All tied into emotions, pleasure. All right, so in this chapter, we'll look at some basic principles of motivations, some of the concepts, things affiliated with motivations, right? Such as achievement. You think you are motivated here in order to achieve. And as since you say, why do you want to achieve? Why do you want to get a degree? Right? Maybe the argument is a general one, and you're saying, well, I want a degree to get money so I can have a career. Why do you want to have a career? Well, I'm motivated because it'll build my self-esteem. It'll give me a title. It'll give me an identity. It'll give me an identity within a group. Right? A group of human beings in some way. It'll bring forth emotional reward if I satisfy what I set out to achieve. You have a goal in mind, and thus all your desires and motivations are directed towards completing that, which is to get a degree, a bachelor's degree, let's say for the most part. Right? And you say, well, really it is emotional. It's social belonging. You want to belong. In order to belong, that builds self-esteem as well too. So you say, well, how worthy are you? Maybe you say objectively, it depends on what you actually think about yourself. Self-actualization, which we'll look at later. But for the most part, it's gauged on what others think of you. Your integrity, your respect, your intelligence, things of that nature. Right? Tied into emotional reward with social belonging. All right, we'll also look at hunger. We'll probably do that more on Friday, theories and physiology of emotion, expressing and experiencing emotion. Okay, so we got a couple theories. Why do we have so many theories in psychology? What do you think about this? Why so many theories? Why not any laws? Well, we have some laws. Why do we have so many theories? Why are there so many theories in academia period? But especially in psychology.
So because of just the nature of theory, to get to a law, you need to, trying to remember the exact reasons, but it's like to get to a law, you have to be, it's basically provable, right? Like,
Somewhat, right?
yeah, whatever, it's fully defined, it's to the point that it can be simplified down to say this is always true, and a theory is, this is our best concept, it might be 80% there.
Yeah,
There is
more
a
except.
point- Yeah, or a 20% or 30% or a 50%, we don't know,
Yeah.
but we can, we can explain, this percentage to a high certainty, and this is our functioning understanding of what it is, and especially the human mind, it's work on.
Right, well, okay, excellent. Will says, law is maybe has some certainty agreed upon by most or all. Theory may be agreed upon by most, or at least more than half of a consensus in some sort of abstract way. Right, it's complicated. Theory. The human mind is evolving, the human species is evolving. All species are evolving. So how could we have laws when things are constantly changing? You think the technology in the last 30 years doesn't have anything to do with the evolution of our children and grandchildren? My children are wonderful at their tablets, masters, 2 years old and 4 years old. I myself may be at the same age as I wasn't really programmed with the genetic coding of having the experience of my parents use that sort of technology. Maybe a little bit of a laggard if I was 2 or 4 back, whatever, in the late 80s or something like that. Right, so you think we're constantly evolving, so the theories are evolving too, changing. Yeah, we have maybe basic premises of behavior that we could say maybe are globalized or some sort of consensus, right, internationally, but things change. All right, instinct theory, right, genetically predisposed predisposed behaviors, right? Evolutionary theory, right? We say, hey, we're driven by instinct. That is our first one, right? We have evolved, and so our genetics from our ancestors have created this sort of programming in us to be driven towards particular things, right? Hunter-gatherer societies, thus we may be driven towards violence, protection of tribal members. Obviously, we are genetically predisposed or driven towards sex to reproduce for the species to continue. Hunger, thirst, all of the above. Right? And so we say, hey, it's not necessarily mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, but it's the human family have a genetic predisposition towards certain fundamental principles of drive. All right, we got drive reduction theory. Response to inner pushes in pool. We love homeostasis. Unfortunately, we are rarely in it. Who's in homeostasis right now? You feel good? You feel pretty good? You're not too tired? Could you use a little bit more rest?
I'm like 90% there. Yeah,
You got
as soon as you
stuff?
mentioned it, I was like, can't complain.
What about a lot of things on your mind? Other than what you're doing right now?
This is the interesting thing where lately have been considering stuff like that, where I'm looking at stuff like drive reduction theory. I'm like, okay, so in the past, definitely there'd be stuff that would be a ton of holes inside of me of I have anxiety about this, I'm worrying about this, and I am starting to grow the emotional intelligence to be like, hey, this is something coming up, I have no control over it yet, you don't have to worry about it. So it's like the control of the own stresses and stuff like that, and being able to let go of some things, let other things motivate you, and be aware and tap into what you're going to let motivate you and what you're going to set aside. So like right now, I've set aside a lot of stuff just to be like, all right, cool, like we're at a good point to class.
Excellent. Right? Essentially, what Will is saying that he has brought more conscious awareness to things that we usually call some stress and anxiety, rearranged it in his conscious mind, right? Gave it different values now and say, hey, I'm going to say that some things aren't important as they were before. Because before, I let my mind run. And letting anything run is unconscious behavior. Right? That means you are not aware. Your mind is in chaos. Right? Chaos is anxiety. We don't like angst. Right? So drive reduction theory is say, hey, you know, we have push and pulls, which is angst. And we don't like angst. We don't like anxiety. Right? Angst is sort of the German word that Nietzsche came up with to kind of way to describe anxiety. So we don't like anxiety. This is why you are bored in class, you look at your laptop, phone, blah, 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 right? You don't like anxiety. And so you're gonna do something in order to reduce that drive, right? So we're responding to inner pushes and pulls. The environment is always pulling on you, and you're always pushing towards some sort of goal. Remember we said unconsciously, we have the hierarchy of food, water, sex, but then at the same point, you're like, hey, I'm not even hungry, but I walk past and smell a cheeseburger. I gotta have a cheeseburger. We say, well, the unconscious mind says you're not hungry, right? Else the lining of your stomach will rub together, it'll growl, you'll be hungry. They say that's not happening, but I smell a cheeseburger. Therefore, I want a cheeseburger, and even though I don't necessarily need it subconsciously, right, to survive. So we say the environment has caused me to shift to do something other than what is probably natural, right? But this is constant. We can't get away from it. Nearly impossible, right? Just too much stimulus around us. Which means that you, in order to maybe subside that, even like Will kind of elaborated on this, you need to be more conscious of it, right? If not, The unconscious brain says, we love pleasure. Pleasure is wonderful. Here's another reward. Who doesn't want a reward? Maybe a penalty for a reward, right? Stomach aching, too many cheeseburgers, obesity, diabetes, et cetera. But we could be impulsive if we let sort of our unconscious mind drive us with the pulse. All right, arousal theory, finding the right stimulation level. This kind of goes back to homeostasis as well too, right? To arouse is bad. You may fail the test. You gotta understand, I'm too jacked up on coffee. Even if I know the stuff. Too much arousal causes chaos in the mind. There's a lack of order in your thoughts and your cognitive abilities, right? Which means that your brain is gonna say, we need to calm down first before we start solving problems again, right? Doing equations and going through our memory, short-term, long-term memory. We need the optimal level of arousal. Too little arousal is bad, right? Because you can't energize or stimulate the mind to fire the neurons necessary to even engage long-term memory. You say, I can't remember why. Because I'm too tired. That's awesome. I don't want to remember. Right, you don't want to remember? No. Maybe unconsciously I don't. Until what? Until I get some food in me, the right glucose level, blood sugar goes up or something, right? Until I get some more sleep. Right? Something of the sort. We need the right level of stimulation or arousal to sort of mitigate a good balance of drive. Then we got Maslow's. Who's familiar with Maslow? One person. Anyone else? Can you tell me about Maslow?
It's his needs. So if you don't have one need met, you can't like do the next thing. So you can't do self-actualization until you do like having food.
Do you find it to be something over a lifespan or something that happens during a daily period or some sort? Or what was Maslow kind of indicating? Was it more of a long-term lifespan pyramid theory, or is it something that we express on a daily basis?
Was it long term? I don't quite recall.
Right, yeah, mostly long-term, right? But we can maybe, positive as something on a day-to-day basis if we are reached the pyramid. What are we gonna say about that?
I was just gonna comment on it. I think it does talk about the, like, life priority, but I think it almost kind of resets every day, because it also talks about at the lowest level, like, shelter, food and water and stuff. And like, every day that can change, so it's like, hey, maybe I was on step 6, but my house burned down, and now tomorrow I'm at stage 1 again, where I just need shelter, because, I mean, you might not die, but it's like at the same time.
Yeah.
You
Right, you say everything's fine, and you're a wealthy person one day, next day war hits your area, and now you're bombed, house is bombed, and now you're no longer concerned with your title as a professor, right? Your $1 billion, you're concerned with staying alive, right? Maybe self-actualization is something that goes out the window by next Tuesday, right? It may reset later on in life if things sort of normalize back out. So yes, it can be applied both long-term and in short-term sort of frequencies, but we'll look at that a little later. So think about your own drives, right? You are in constant conflict with your unconscious automated processes and your conscious mind saying that, hey, we have an ego in order to facilitate me being great. We all want to be great based on environmental constructions, social constructions. What's great today is maybe not great tomorrow, right? There were no likes and follows 30 years ago. Maybe, but in a different way, right? And you say, well, that's important to me. How many views, followers, and likes you get might determine your drives. It's changed over time, right? And then for someone else, you're like, well, that absolutely has no value whatsoever to me, right? Because I'm concerned with basic sort of needs first. Okay, so we got instinct and evolutionary theory. Instinct, complex behavior throughout the species, unlearned fixed patterns. We don't have to learn instincts, right? And reflex, we don't have to learn reflexes and instincts. They are posited within us to a fixed pattern, right? So we have an instinct to follow a certain pattern of behavior over time. Then we have an assumption with evolutionary psychology. Genes predispose some species typical behaviors. We kind of went through that. All right, then we got drive reduction theory. Physiological needs create an aroused, motivated state, an incentive, right? Going back to sort of conditioning, we say, well, the human being operates on a reward punishment sort of principle. Right? We want to get away from punishment and get as many rewards as possible. Right? So if we find that being hungry is punishing, right? We want to reduce that punishing state. We will become aroused, thus we will become motivated and energetic to reduce the hunger state by getting food. We need an incentive for reward. All right, when physiological needs increase, so does the psychological drive to reduce those needs, right? We talked about that with homeostasis. We love the center point between the yin and the yang, right? We all want to constantly achieve that perpetually throughout life, right? It never stops, always there. We're constantly seeking some sort of balance, right? And so we'll tend to move towards the center depending on which side we are, whether it's a physiological need or that something that creates a psychological drive. And then we're pushed by needs to reduce drive and pulled by incentives. The environment will create incentives as you walk around it, right? You walk around, you may see someone attractive and think, interesting. You walk around, see a car that you wish you could have, and now you may become motivated to say, well, I need to do something in order to obtain that vehicle, right? I need to do something in order to obtain that bachelor's degree. I need to be motivated and have drive in order to do all this work. And then with arousal theory, we say that some motivated behaviors can increase rather than decrease, right? Which creates arousal. Human motivation aims to find optimal arousal levels, not to eliminate, bless you, not to eliminate arousal, right? So we're constantly looking for optimal arousals. If you had it your way, you probably wouldn't be here. If there was a way to say, hey, let me shortcut to get the bachelor's degree without doing the work, let's say you could pay for the degree, you would, right? Because one would say, I could be using my time otherwise traveling the world if I didn't have to do that. Right? We would seek optimal arousal. We would want to eat as much as possible. Unfortunately, there's consequences, right? We would want to maybe participate in sexual activity as possible, but unfortunately, there's consequences to this all. But we have a tendency to move towards maximum or optimal arousal. Right? We don't want to eliminate arousal. Yerkes and Dawson's, which is pretty old law in psychology, states that moderate arousal leads to optimal performance. And we said homeostasis is your best place to be if you want to perform your best work. Right? So too many cups of coffee is bad for performance, too little cups of coffee is also bad. Right? And just one dose of coffee for all your coffee drinkers. Good amount of sleep is good, 7 to 8 hours. 4 hours is horrible. Sleeping for 12 hours, your mind will be most likely in a very slow, even depressed state. Right? At that point, you're not aroused. And then with Maslow's, right? The hierarchy, the pyramid of needs, right, or pyramid of motivation and drives. It begins at the base with physiological needs that must first be met and be satisfied. Right? There's no need for a degree if you're gonna die of hunger. There's no need for a title as a professor if you don't have water to drink. You have to satisfy those things. Right? If you don't have a place to live, you don't have security, there's going to be no need to be going out on dates or anything like that. Right? You gotta satisfy some basic needs first before you move to the next. Before people can fulfill their higher level safety needs, then their psychological needs. So we need food, water, shelter, safety. We need to be able to feel safe. Right? Before we can obtain self-actualization, self-realization, however you want to describe it, right? Your higher self, your ideal self. So think about for people who live in impoverished communities. You say they are struggling to satisfy basic needs. What is wrong with these people in this environment? How come they can't get it together? They just can't seem to get motivated. They don't seem to have drive. Right? And go to another environment, you say, wow, these people are doing very well. Look at the big houses here in River Forest. Look at the cars. These people are motivated. They have drive. What's the difference? Major difference. You see, you're not even able to satisfy psychological needs, which is social sort of improvement, belonging, right? Group membership, community building, etc., and even self-actualization, being your greatest potential self, if you're struggling for basic needs. Because those individuals are not in homeostasis as much as those who have money, for the most part, right? Money can be a good sort of equalizer in that equation, not always, but most of the time, yes. Right? Thus, they live with a case of constant anxiety and not able to achieve the necessary amount of drive to move up the social ladder. Right? All right, here's Maslow's. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Maslow's. All right. We start at the base of the pyramid. A few things have been added over the years, right, towards the top of the pyramid. They kind of broke up self-transcendence and self-actualization, right? Transcendence is kind of new. Like, what does it mean to transcend yourself? Right? Really esteem. All right, so we start at the bottom. Physiological needs. Self-explanatory. Need to satisfy hunger and thirst, right? Have nothing to eat, nothing to drink in terms of water, you are dead, right? So no need to think about anything about that. And next we get our safety needs. Needs to feel that the world is organized and predictable, need to feel safe, secure, and stable, right? We like to feel that it's okay to walk down the streets and get here without being murdered, right? Or bombed, or shot at. Maybe in Chicago, not even so much these days, but you like to have that need that the world is predictable and you can predict what's going to happen next. That brings you a sense of security, a sense of predictability, stability, and a little bit more homeostasis, right? Less anxiety. All right, next we want to belong. Human beings have a tendency to love groups. When you talk to anybody and ask them to describe themselves or identify, they're going to tell you what groups they belong to. They'll tell you their racial group, ethnic group. They may tell you their sexual orientation. They may tell you their religious affiliation, maybe just their life philosophy, some sort of personal ideology, right? Atheist, agnostic, something of the sort. They'll tell you their political sort of groups that they subscribe to. They'll tell you they're students or not. They'll tell you they're professors or not. Right? They may tell you their education levels, their income levels, social status. Right? We want to feel accepted. And it's interesting that esteem needs is built right on top of that, because esteem is fundamentally tied in with acceptance and belonging, social acceptance, right? We want the need to avoid loneliness. Human beings are a social animal, which means that your cells can actually die off if you are not socializing, right? And we want to avoid separation from familiarity. Also a phenomenon where people who are in aging populations tend to die off very quickly if their spouse has previously died recently. Right? So if you think of people who may have retired, been married for 40, 50 years, husband or wife passes away, husband moves to Florida, right? Think he's gonna enjoy golf and hang out on the beach, and 6 months later he dies, right? Quite a common phenomenon. Like, well, what's the deal with that, right? Well, when we say our minds are connected to our cells, and our cell says, hey, you know what, the mind is no longer motivated to live, we'll shut down these cells and you'll die, right? All tied in. So we need to belong. We need to constantly have motivation to even belong and have loving needs. And we saw those rhesus monkeys, they need emotional sort of love, even more so than material needs. All right, then we got esteem needs. Need for self-esteem, your own self-valuation. How do you value yourself? Are you 100 right now? Are you at 70? Are you at 80? Who feels wonderful about themselves? Who feels crappy about themselves? Who feels that they could do better? Do better. Right? We probably all do. Right? Nobody's really special in that department. We all wish we had more money. Right? We all wish maybe we slightly looked a little different, like some sort of ideal version of even ourselves. Maybe we wish we could fast forward a lot of things and be done with a lot of things so we can have that sort of esteem. Achievement, confidence, independence, need for recognition, and respect from others. For the most part, think of students want to be respected intellectually. You are here because in some way, you probably believe you're smart, right? Probably believe you're pretty intelligent. You're like, hey, I'm in college. I'm not some dummy. I know how to learn, right? I know concepts, models, theories, definitions, right? Maybe how to apply them in some, and that's extremely valuable to your self-esteem. If you were to drop out of college, you may feel some anxiety of saying, hey, my self-esteem is low, my self-valuation has went down. Because me being in that learning environment was extremely important to how I evaluated myself. All right, and then above that, we get self-actualization, the need to live up to our fullest and unique potential. Fullest and unique potential. You may say, hey, I don't want children, nor do I want to get married in this lifetime. Right? The question would be why? You would say, well, I think that society is crap, or it's a lot of work, it's a ton of money, and nature says, I don't really care about that. That's your conscious mind using the social environment to create a unique and different narrative other than what you're placed here for, right? Just as any organism. You don't have to be humans we're talking about, right? Because in order to continue, we need to produce more, right? And so maybe later in life, such self-actualization is to create an offspring that maybe can exceed your own potential, right? That can potentially be self-actualization. Maybe it's for you to give all the money away. You made $1 billion, you gave away $1 billion. Because the goal was to make the money, maybe not to keep the money, right? Maybe you get your PhD, or you get this wonderful career with a great title. You've actualized who you want it to be. You say, hey, I want to make a ton of money, ton of education, have a wonderful family, beautiful wife, attractive husband of some sort, travel the world, and now I did that. I've actualized my needs. Right? And then you go beyond that. You say, well, it's not enough. Not enough. Maybe at one point later in life, you say, stop. All of this was meaningless. Right? Maybe you have an aha moment. You say, you know what? It was all meaningless. It was only valuable to the other people or to the people who created that system. Systems of education, systems of money creation, currency. Right? You say it's all an illusion. It means nothing. You're still in this body, trapped with this mind. Doesn't matter if you get the car, don't have the car. Right? Doesn't matter anything when you out, and eventually you say, well, you know what, there's something beyond it. Something beyond even maybe yourself. Right? Because you say having motivated and driven to achieve goals that were completely egotistical. They were all to build up my persona of how awesome I potentially want to be. And then maybe you stop and say, there's something more. That other stuff didn't matter so much. Maybe there's a higher power to some sort, right? Maybe you don't know what the higher power is. We can't describe it. Maybe we don't know, but maybe we ponder and we seek it out and we try to figure out what that is. Maybe you dive in deep into yourself internally and stop lying to yourself and become who you really are, right? Stop placating for others. Right? You finally take off the mask, and you become you. You transcend beyond the ego and become who you are fully. Right? Jung says that, hey, in order to be a complete human being, we need to be anima and animus, which means that every human being has a masculine and feminine sort of duality. Right? But in our society, we're either guided towards more masculine, ignoring sort of emotions of we're masculine men, and ignoring logic if we are feminine women. So, Jung kind of theorized that in order to become a full self, you tap into all of who you are internally, right? You blend emotion with logic to become your optimal sort of human persona. All right, so self-transcendence, the need to find meaning and identity beyond the self. Right? Because remember we say, hey, you're here in school to get a degree, to get a job, to make the money, to travel the world, but then I'll ask you why. Right? An ignorant answer would say, because I want to. Like, great, let's drive. Not special. Right? You're driven by unconscious motivations that everybody wants, which is pleasure. Everybody wants to. Right? That's desire. Desire is pleasure. Who doesn't want optimal desire? Right? And you say, well, you know what? I no longer seek optimal desire. I seek sort of reducing optimal desire because I find there's something meaningful in doing it. You say, maybe I fast. But why would I fast when food is awesome? Food tastes wonderful. Who would fast? Maybe someone who finds a deeper, self-transcending need for meaning. Right? And you sort of subside these impulses. All right, the need to belong, the affiliation needs. Central human motivation to build relationships and feel part of a group and enhance their survival. Right, to be part of a group is good. Right? 2 is better than 1. 4 is better than 2. Usually 100 is better than 50. Right? For the most part. There can be negatives and downsides to those too. Colors, thoughts, and emotions. Right? Being part of a group gives a frame of reference, interaction, back and forth. Right? So we say it colors our thoughts and emotions. Right? We paint in dialogue how we feel and people respond. And it sort of gives a good feedback to what the emotion we're feeling is, right? Left to our own sort of definitions of the things, would be an extreme bias, right? So the color starts by maybe eliminating the bias in emotions. Related to health, performance, and self-esteem, forced loneliness and social isolation, and then self-determination theory, competence, autonomy, and relatedness. When we say we like relatedness because we like human beings who love familiarity. Anything that's unfamiliar, once again, is anxiety. We try to reduce anxiety by making things familiar, and relatedness is part of familiarity. All right, being shut out, ostracized, social exclusion, right? Anyone here ever been ostracized for some reason? You've been excluded from a group, from your family, or you're the black sheep, right? Of some sort. Friends, do your friends no longer talk to you? Right? Do people avoid you? Do they not like who you've become, positive or good? Right? Are people just haters for some reason? Right? This threads the need to belong and causes pain. Although we may deal with it and cope, it does create some sort of unconscious anxiety, right? Because we do like to be alone and wish that we were accepted. We do like some sort of wish fulfillment, although it may never come. Right? You may never get along with your family. They're a pain in the butt. Right? They've ostracized you. Right? And although you say, hey, I don't care, subconsciously you do. Right? You may wish that things were different, but you have no control over it. So you have to deal with it. And it causes pain subconsciously. You say, well, consciously it doesn't because I don't think about it. Well, great. It's still there. Right? Which means we may need some therapy. Social media ostracism causes similar pain, right? We think of anything social media. We get the presentation on dating, right? Being ghosted causes pain. No one likes to be rejected, right? For the woman in class, you went up to a guy that you thought was handsome and you said, no, I don't think you're attractive. You probably sure it'd be a painful experience, right? For as men, we went up to a woman we're attracted to and put ourselves out there. It will cause us pain. Why? Because it would hurt our self-esteem. Right? We think, why am I not good enough for this individual? Kind of silly to think that way, but nonetheless, it is very common. All right, and then we said we focus and motivate corrective action, positive and negative remedies, right? So maybe we will self-assess, reassess, right? Analyze ourselves and say, well, what can I do different? What can I do different to be accepted? Right? Which means we'll alter our behavior and go against our own really moral, ethical beliefs to be accepted. We'll change the way we dress, even if we really don't like it, the fashion. We'll change the way we talk in some degree to be more accepted towards the group, even though it may sound like we're dumbing ourselves down. We're not doing ourselves a favor. Right? We'll do all sort of positive and negative remedies so we don't feel excluded socially. And lastly, we'll end with this, mobile networks and social media, right? We have to talk about social media because it's such an influence on behavior these days. Positive and negatives. It provides information and supportive connections amongst friends and family, so social media is good if you're connecting with people. Before Facebook, I mean, we had MySpace to start out with. Who was on MySpace in this class?
That made one.
You were on MySpace like the last day MySpace probably existed, right?
Yeah, I think I made an Instagram account like before it blew up, and I still don't know. I have like the social media for everything, and I've never touched it.
Yeah. So think about that. Like when I was growing up, when you graduated grammar school, you never saw the people ever again in life. right? And then my parents were like, that was it, right? You graduated, never saw the people. 99% of the people. Now you're on Facebook and Instagram, and you see everybody from high school and grammar school, right? So it's good. You say, well, otherwise we would never see these people and never communicate. We wouldn't know what happened to them, how their lives went. Now we could look at it like, oh wow, look, that person did this and that, right? So it's good for that to keep connections. Activate reward centers in the brain. Remember we said that dopamine, right? A little bit of adrenaline rush, dopamine, reward. What time is it? Somebody call out the time.
49.
Alright. Function as a matchmaker, right? We can find love by DMing or going on dating sites, right? Predict longer life when used in moderation. Should it be excessively used? Causes fixation, compulsions to see what's happening with useless information that you will never benefit from. Enable comparisons that can create envy and depression. You're looking at people, the car they have, where they travel to, and immediately you're thinking, how come I'm not in Paris? How come I don't have a Benz? How come I don't have a private jet, right? And support narcissistic tendencies, right? Which is pivotal for social media because it's really about the me. Look at me. All right, that's it. We have our presentation on Friday. And we'll look a little bit more at some concepts with